Roadkill. His feet pounded the pavement with a steady rhythm that ate up the miles. But was it fast enough? His breathing was laboured now. He was pushing hard, testing his body and his own resolve. He was, he knew, reaching his limit, venturing into unknown territory. But he couldn't stop now, couldn't let up for a moment. There was too much at stake. It was the miles that mattered, only the miles. The more he could get under his belt, the better. Dusk was already upon him, and soon night would fall. But there were still so many miles to cover before he could relax. He'd worked so hard and planned for so long. To let it all slip away now. His feet pounded on, and he forced such thoughts from his head, inviting a zen state of emptiness, focusing his attention on the steady in and out of his breath, and on the rhythmic beat of his feet on the asphalt. "I'm sorry, Jen. I just don't agree," said Will, taking his eyes momentarily off the dark road ahead to cast a challenging glance at his companion. "Civilization," he went on, "the civilizing influence, it's just a veneer, and it's a tenuous thing, you know? All it takes is some kind of catalyst for that veneer to be peeled away. And what do we find underneath?" Will shrugged. "That deep down, we're all just animals."
Grrr.
Jen mocked, smiling affectionately, petite hands hooked into the parody of claws. "I'm trying to make a serious point here, Jen." Will sighed indignantly.
I don't know. I just don't buy that humanity is inherently evil crap. People are better than that. They're basically good. Of course there are the bad apples, but they're the exception.
Exasperated, Will butted in. "Yeah, all right, but..."
Most people are decent, caring human beings. Conspicuous generosity. It's in the genes.
Will's reply was delivered in sarcastic tones. "I love that you think that way, Jen. It comforts me, it really does." She grinned broadly, displaying perfect teeth.
Is that right? You're lucky I do think that way, Will.
Outside the comfortable confines of the Jaguar's upholstered interior, the English countryside flashed past in the darkness. The assured rumble of the engine, almost imperceptible above the gentle roar of tyres on asphalt.
We interrupt this program to bring you some breaking news for the Surrey Borders area. Reports coming in tonight suggest that a number of disturbed patients have escaped from Prestwick Sanitarium and are, as we speak, at large in the region. The individuals in question are thought to be highly dangerous, and the public is advised to be vigilant and warned to avoid contact with them at all costs. Any unusual activity should be reported immediately. A police spokesperson has issued a statement declaring that a county-wide manhunt is underway and that their recapture forms the police force's #1 priority.
The couple glanced at one another uncertainly. Then, Will reached down, switching off the radio with a click. There was a brief hiatus as something moving outside in the darkness caught her eye. A man appeared, stumbling into the road, his white shirt just a blur in the gloom. Jen started violently, gripping the dashboard and screaming.
Will, look out!
It was so sudden. Will caught the merest glimpse of him as he loomed into view out of the night.
Shit!
He gripped the steering wheel, turning sharply. There was a sudden, violent impact that sent the man sprawling bodily across the hood, then up out of sight over the roof. His pale, horribly contorted face seen for a flashing instant as it dashed past the windshield, leaving a bloody streak in its wake. Will stomped on the brakes, and the Jaguar slid to an abrupt halt at the edge of the road, its engine idling. Inside the car, the two stared at one another in shock, breathing hard.
Are you alright, Jen?
Yeah, I think so.
She replied, her voice a little shaky.
We should see if he's okay?
He gazed at her in silence for a moment.
"Do you honestly think that's wise right now, Jen?"
He said flatly. "You heard what they said on the radio."
He might be hurt.
She retorted.
He might be dead.
Will glared at her.
"We should just get the hell out of here."
His hand moved to the gear shift. She glared at him then, her hand gripping his, holding it.
Are you serious? We can't just leave him lying in the road, Will. It wouldn't be right.
Will just stared at her, nonplussed. She sighed.
If you won't do it, I will.
She unclipped her seatbelt, but Will stopped her, gripping her wrist. Hold on, sweetie, he snarled. I'll go. Jen relaxed in her seat.
Just be careful,
she insisted, as he exited the car. He smiled, shaking his head. It's a rare occasion when I'm not. The driver door closed behind him with an expensive thud, leaving her cocooned in the quiet, leather-clad interior of the Jaguar. Jen felt fidgety and agitated. She had been so looking forward to this getaway with Will. It was long overdue. They'd been cooped up for too long, and hadn't had a chance to get out together for ages. They'd been planning this trip for months, and now this. Her wistful train of thought was interrupted by a sudden gust of screaming from outside. Alarmed, she twisted around in her seat, anxious to find out what the hell was happening. There was an indistinct movement out there in the gloom. Then, a sudden heavy impact sent the car rocking on its springs. She started violently at that, then again. Some heavy body slammed into the back of the Jaguar, the boot lid popping open with the force of the impact. She blinked, unsure of what to do, her mind a turmoil of concern and fear and dark imaginings. What on earth was Will up to? Was he alright? Had that man attacked him? Who was this stranger who appeared suddenly out of the night? And what was happening out there in the darkness? Peering apprehensively through the rear window, she could make nothing out in the red-stained gloom behind the car, where the Jaguar's taillights blazed on, oblivious to her concerns. Outside, all had fallen silent after that brief welter of excitement, save for the low idle of the car's engine. Nothing moved beyond the glass, and Jen was left stalled, in a paroxysm of fear and doubt, as the clock set into the dashboard languidly ticked away the seconds. She started again in glassy-eyed fear as the driver door was suddenly ripped open. Will collapsed into the seat, plastered in blood and nursing a vicious bite mark on the heel of his right hand.
Bastard bit me,
he laughed nervously, his face a mask of ill-concealed hysteria.
What's the matter with people?
Oh Lord, are you alright?
Let's just get the hell out of here. Will smiled tightly, dropping the gearbox into drive and flooring the accelerator. Jen struck a match, letting its flame flare in the low-lit dining room, before touching it, one by one, to the neat cluster of candles on the table. Will appeared from the kitchen, brandishing a bottle of wine. He blew a fine cloud of dust from the label.
Does this one meet with Madam's approval?
He beamed, setting the bottle down on the table beside her.
Ooh, that is a nice find. How's your hand?
Will ran a thumb thoughtfully over the bandage on his injured hand, then shrugged.
It's alright. You should see the other guy.
He grinned, slipping a corkscrew from his pocket, and attacking the wine bottle. Their glasses clinked together as they gazed into one another's eyes.
To us,
declared Will, thoughtfully swirling the 91 Chinnas in its glass before taking a sip. Jen smiled, touching his hand affectionately.
To us.
She agreed. Then, brightening, she added,
And this delicious-looking meal.
casting him a shy, sidelong glance. Smiling, he took the seat adjacent to hers, at the corner of the dining table, tucking a napkin into his shirt collar and taking up his knife and fork.
What do you think?
He inquired. Jen took a forkful, chewing slowly, relishing the succulent meat.
It's to die for.
She declared with a radiant smile, a thin runnel of blood streaming down her chin. Will snatched up a napkin and dabbed it away affectionately, as her eyes sparkled in the candlelight. The corpse lay supine across the better part of the dining table, a hefty joint carved cleanly out of the inside of one thigh, where his running shorts had been neatly rolled up. Below the table, blood was pooling on the parquet floor, a pair of acid green assicks forming an island in its swelling crimson lagoon.
A real spot of luck running into him like that,
said Will nonchalantly, a forkful of meat held aloft in his bandaged right hand.
Oh, I know.
She nodded appreciatively.
And the meat is so lean.
She chewed on contemplatively for several seconds before continuing.
I suppose it was perhaps a little reckless, bringing him here though.
Will nodded, working on a mouthful of meat. Washing it down with the remainder of his wine, he replied, "True, but it is a special occasion."
We ought not stay too long though,
said Jen with a look of concern.
Once they realise Dr. Armstrong's jag is missing, they're bound to check the house.
Will topped off both their glasses. "Point taken, my dear. Point taken." They toasted once more, their eyes locked together as their glasses met with a celebratory clink.
We've been waiting so long for this,
She beamed.
and this evening couldn't possibly have turned out better.
Will smiled smugly. "Anything for you, my sweet." He shrugged, sinking his teeth into a fresh forkful of raw human flesh. You have been listening to the Savage Bites podcast, with me, Christian Bravery. The first half of this story was pretty much directly lifted from a short horror movie I made back in 2008 with some friends. That movie was pretty flawed, although it was a hugely fun experience to make. But I was never really satisfied with the ending of that film, and I always thought I could make a better fist of it. So I endeavoured to do that here. I hope it wasn't too obvious that Will and Jen were the escaped hospital patients. And I guess you have to feel a little bit sorry for our unnamed runner from the opening, whose hard work and dedication in training only really served to provide some nice steaks for Will and Jen. Okay, so that wraps up episode 14. Coming up in the next episode, we have a little story by the name of Seen in a Window. And with that, I'm Christian Bravery. You have been listening to the Savage Bites podcast at savagebites.net.